Yet edition of the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Meeting happening live at the La Palm Royal Beach Hotel, Labadi Beach, I should say, here in Accra. And of course, we are having a great discussion. Topic for discussion this time round is how businesses can navigate through this economic turbulence. So basically, thriving through an economic turbulence. And I've got great panelists here to begin the discussion for the event prior to the main one in the auditorium where Winston Amwa will take over. Gratefully, I have with me Emmanuel Jima, who is the MD for Mina Chemicals. He's seated on my far left, and Kwabena Buama, CEO of Sims, also seated close to me. Gentlemen, great you could join me on the program. Let's begin first off with the topic for discussion for today, thriving through economic turbulence. Emmanuel, what do you make of this topic?
Thank you. Good morning to your viewers and listeners. Now, when we talk about economic turbulence, now we're looking at a situation where it is difficult to get revenue, at the same time to make profit. Now the question is, how do you navigate or ensure that even within these hard times, you'll be able to survive? Now the first thing I will talk about is that we need to look at our bottom line, that is the profit. Now here you have an instance where you need to cut down on some expenses. Some expenses may not be necessary. Now again, you need to look at the areas where you have low margins. You can eliminate those ones. So we're looking at what do you do such that your profit would increase. All right. Now, how do you engage your customers? How do you get them onto the phone? So you're reducing expenses and at the same time trying to increase revenue. Now, how do you increase this revenue? Number one, you need to ensure that you maintain your existing customers. Now, why do I say that? Getting repeat business is cheaper than to go look for new customers. So much as you try to look for new customers, make sure you keep your customers, make your customers happy. After all, the customer is the king. So once you make him happy, you can go ahead and make more money. Now, the other item I would want us to look at is the competition. What are your competitors doing? What is it that you can learn from them in terms of pricing, in terms of your product, your packaging, etc.? So when you look at this, then it would help you to also come in. Now, also look at yourself. What is it that you are very good at? We call it unique selling proposition. Now, something is there that your company is able to do that makes your company quite distinct and stands out. And you need to hammer and concentrate on that. Now, again, we want to look at the balance sheet. So those that I talked about has to do with the profit and loss. Now, the balance sheet. Now, what is it that you can do to enhance your balance sheet? Now, the cash flow, you have to manage your cash flow very well. Your cash reserve, you need to ensure that if it is not necessary for you to buy with cash, do not do that. Concentrate on getting things like suppliers credit. Now, there it gives you some breathing space. So if you have even 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, now you can sell before you go back and pay your money. All right? And then the other thing that I talked about and I would always discuss is the G factor. Now, what is the G factor? And that is the God factor. Now, in all this, do not forget that when you are doing business in these turbulent times, things might be tough. It might be rough, but you need to consult. You consult your business partners, you consult your relatives, you consult your employees, etc., talk to them. But there is one power that can help you in times of challenge. Talk to God, pray to God, consult Him, and He would give you the ideas that you have never even thought of. And once you flow with those ideas, you would make it and make it more. Thank you.
Great. So, Kwabena, for Emmanuel, he's given an indication that irrespective of the turbulent times we find ourselves in, there is still hope for businesses. Is that so for you?
Yes, it is. And another good morning to your cherished viewers and listeners as well. I mean, when we say the times are difficult or the times are hard, there are two basic things we are addressing as a business. One, as he mentioned, is your top line, which is your revenues. And the revenues are suffering because people's purchasing power have declined. And they've declined because prices have gone high. We've seen periods of inflation above 40% for quite a while now, from beginning of the year till now. And that is a challenge for businesses in terms of the revenues. Then the other point he made reference to was the fact that costs have also gone up. So your top line has declined, but your expenses to run the business have also gone up. In the midst of this, the reason why there's hope is that every business needs to have what we call the growth mindset. Once the business has a growth mindset, it means that there is hope. And what do we mean by the growth mindset? That is having the belief that what you're going through is just for a moment, number one, and that you will definitely come out of it. Then number two, you do not stick to business the same way you have done it over the years. It is time for you to look within and reinvent yourself. People will jump into cutting costs, but the first step is actually to look at how you can increase your revenues by reinventing yourself. Then when you look at that, then you come to the cost. And on the cost side, there are quite a number of things that you can do. Sometimes as businesses, when you are thriving, you get to a stage where you begin to have nice to haves. In these times, you can cut off the nice to haves. Some of them will mean probably relocating your office as an SME from Airport Square to Jolu or Abelempe. You reduce your rental cost. Then again, you also look at your process flow as a business. Because revenues have dropped, demand has declined. Look at your process flow again and see what can you cut down. If 10 people were working on 50 requests or demands and the demand has dropped to 20 or 30, you do not need 10. This is where you look at the process and redeploy the people into areas that can generate revenues. So there is hope, even in the midst of what we are going through now. And Ghanaians are very resilient.
Great. And I think businesses really do not have a case to say that irrespective of the economic turbulence, it's really not a case for me to grow.
That's the fixed mindset, which says because of what we are going through, there's no growth. So you remain where you are and you realize that you are crushed by the environment. But the growth mindset says that it is possible, and you believe that your dream and the vision that you had for setting the business still lives. So what can you do differently to enable you overcome the times and the seasons that we are in? He talked about certain business traits in terms of pricing, in terms of your offering, in terms of redoing the same thing, repackaging the same thing, and then redesigning your own marketing to ensure that you can still rake in the customers and survive in these times.
Sure. Kwabena, for you, looking at the macroeconomic fundamentals, inflation keeps increasing. Until recently, we saw inflation drop. Interest rates still high, and the environment, basically private sector businesses will tell you, it's not favorable, and now you are telling them to keep hope alive.
Okay, right. As you rightly said, inflation is hovering over and above 40%. Utilities are going up the roof, but you are here to do business. Entrepreneurship, you don't give up. It's your persistence and your imagining. So this is a time to stretch your imagination. What is it that we can do and do differently, okay, to ensure that we stay afloat? Now, look at areas where it is possible to diversify and still make profit. In other words, if you diversify and ensure that it is viable, and then you can diversify. Again, look at what the competition is. What are your competitors doing? That is very, very important. And look at, because there might be one or two products or services that you can offer and offer very, very well at very, very marginal cost. Now, let's look at your marketing and sales aspect even. Social media is available now. I am not saying don't go to the traditional media, because they would also need. Graphic is here. We are a graphics program. So, of course, I would say go to graphic, go to others. But social media is cheaper, virtually free. You can use WhatsApp, you can use Facebook, you can use all the others and market your product. So make sure you have a market presence. Make sure that your brand remains in the minds of people, and definitely you'll make it. Thank you.
Great. So, Kwabena, let me come to you quickly. We saw what happened over the past 2 years. We're in serious and dire economic times. Now, you telling us that, okay, there's still hope in all of these. But businesses will tell you that irrespective, again, of the challenges we find ourselves, it's been difficult. Do you get a sense that they have not been innovative enough, just as Emmanuel mentioned? Is that what you get?
I wouldn't say that. I would rather position it in three ways. Number one, acknowledging where we are and believing that economies and markets go through a cycle. So what we are going through as a country, it's not permanent. And therefore, we will definitely bounce back. And when you are at the bottom, your only way out is go up and not go further down. And then two, businesses will have to revisit their vision and purpose again and see whether their vision and purpose is still relevant in the current circumstance. When they do that, then the third one will be they need to redefine their clients again. You will realize that given the times, probably your client target that you had in the past may not give you the same kind of revenues that you will need to survive. So you need to redefine who your clients are and then begin to tailor your services, your products to suit the new clients that you have defined. And I believe that as a country, we still have clients for all kinds of businesses in the country, even though we are going through difficult times. So long as you are solving a need or a problem, you will make money.
Great. Emmanuel, yes, we are facing some challenges. What can government do to complement the efforts businesses, are trying to, make to weather the storm?
Right. Now, government is supposed to create the enabling environment. They're trying, but they can do better. Now, you're looking at the utility tariffs hitting the roof. There was an increase in electricity by 22% thereabout in September. And first quarter of that's September of last year, first quarter of this year, again they went up. Now water, there's been an increase in water. We have issues with roads. And then the taxes, multiplicity of taxes. Now, if you look at importing raw materials to produce, now you're looking at, first you pay 5% import duty, and then you pay 15% VAT, not on the 100%, but on the 105. You have OAU, you have NHIL, you have other taxes, you have COVID levy, you have levy. Sanitation. Well, sanitation levy is also somewhere there. And then you would also have all other ECOWAS levy, you have this levy, this. You add them all, and you're looking at almost 52 point something percent just to import the raw material. Now you're going to go into production. Now you go into production, and it becomes difficult. Now, even with this, when you bring in the product, I am in the chemical sector, so I can speak about the chemical sector. I happen to be the chairman of chemical sector AGI. Now, we bring in products that are used in the hospital. Take a product like sodium bicarbonate, citric acid. It is meant for dialysis. And we brought in these products at the time when COVID was quite at its highest level. Those times, the prices were high. Now, prices are dropping. Now, you bring it in, and customs will tell you that they're going to charge you or calculate the import duty and the VAT that you have to pay based on the previous higher value. You tell them that, no, it's not correct. I've been able to get a reduction, but they will not take it.
All right.
Now, what they are saying is that pay on that higher amount. Now, you pay that higher amount, definitely you pass it on to the customer or to the final consumer. And this is meant for dialysis, where people who are having problems with their kidney would have to go there weekly, monthly, okay, or twice in a month. And if they have to pay that high amount, what are we doing? So government will need to come in, help us. Yes, of course, we need to pay our taxes as good citizens. Okay, we need to help the government to make money, and the government should ensure that when they make the money, the monies are invested in sectors that would benefit the entire nation.
Great.
Not in sectors that would give them political points.
Sure.
So is it necessary for the citizens now? Is it going to benefit the nation? And that's where they should invest, such that businesses can grow.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Jima, for your time. Is the MD for Mina Chemicals, and Kwabena Buama, CEO of SIMS, there, sharing their perspective with us ahead of the main event happening in just about some few minutes. We'll connect back to Winston Amwa to take it away.
Thank you very much, Pius, and good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for making time to join us this morning. Let me indicate that we're live on the Joy News channel as well as on Joy 99.7 FM. So over the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months, in fact, over the last 1 year, many of us have been concerned about the Ghanaian economy. From the unprecedented announcement of the domestic debt exchange, to a high rise in inflation, high lending rates, we've asked the question consistently, when would it all end? But even as we ask ourselves the simple question, when will it end? For many of us, it feels like we're becoming used to it, because we say, it's not going to end anytime soon. But while it doesn't end anytime soon, the other question is, how do you cope, and how do you, most importantly, thrive? Every day as I drive to work, I keep checking fuel prices. I am always concerned because I say, once they go up, I know inflation is going to go up. And for many people who have loans that have to be paid through the variable rates, they know as the Ghana reference rate goes up, their loan repayment is also going to go up. So here you are today, and if you work in the private sector like I do, you just can't work to your employer and say, increase my salary. But every other thing is increasing in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning, our focus is on thriving during economic turbulence. Yes, we are in a difficult position, but how do we ensure that in the midst of the difficulty, we're able to cope, most importantly, and then thrive? That's our conversation for this morning. My name is Winston Amwa, and we'll start with an opening prayer. I'm told I have to do that. So shall we please bow down our heads and say a short prayer? Heavenly Father, we thank you for your guidance and protection. We thank you for bringing us here, even as we are about to begin. We pray that you shall begin, continue, and end with us. Help us so that we shall have the best of discussions in the interest of Ghana. Amen. Well, I've tried my best in introducing, but I'll now invite the editor of the graphic business, Bohene Asamoah, to give us the welcome address. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you, Winston. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, our eminent panelists, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues from the media. On behalf of the board and management of Graphic Communications Group, I wish to welcome all of you to this third quarter edition of the Graphic Business Stanbic Breakfast Meeting today. As alluded to earlier by Winston, our topic is thriving under these turbulent times. So in my conversations with some business leaders and CEO friends of mine during the course of this year, and I asked the same question, how are they coping over the past years? And these are people who have been leaders and managing business for quite a while. This is what they tell me. And let me tell you the story. So in 1998, 1999, 2000, we went into turbulence. The global, or our two main commodities, that's gold and cocoa, plummeted. The CD nearly depreciated by almost 70%. In 2001, we went to HIPIC. And so the turbulence started from there, at least from what they're saying. In this fourth republic, that is where they started from the analysis from. Then in 2007, again, the global crisis and the financial subprime mortgage crisis that we had affected our economy again. In fact, some analysts said that we had to sell Vodafone at the time to show up our reserves, if you quite remember. And then there was a little bit of doomsaw. 1 year. But this was a refined doomsaw. So we had 24 hours of light. And if you remember, if you are young enough to know, we had 24 hours of full, uninterrupted power, and then 12 hours of light off. And I was in Lagos at the time, and I met a group of journalists in 2007 at a one-week program at West African Institute of Financial and Economic Management, WIFM. And here was I. At the time, Ghana was had a good name on the international market. This was the time where the Nigerian banks were coming into the country, and we kind of have very good names. So there was a lot of attraction on Ghana. And so these my Nigerian colleagues came to me and said, "Oh, you guys are doing well. Ghana is Little London, and all that. And I said, hold on, guys. We are having energy crisis. And I explained to them what I just told you. 24 hours of full light, 12 hours of power crisis. And my Nigerian friends look at me, their jaw dropped, and look at my face. Oga, what do you mean by energy crisis? And I explained to them. One of them walked up to me and told me, my brother, if what you are describing in Ghana as energy crisis, then we in Nigeria are in energy civil war. So fast forward again, after that 2007-2008 crisis, in 2014, not knowing that we're also walking into our own energy civil war. So we had 4 years of doomsaw, 2012 and 2016 to 2016. Now here again, moving forward about 4 or 5 years on, we experienced the COVID-19. This was a shocker for the whole world. The whole world went to sleep, more like, or the whole world went on lockdown. Ghana was on lockdown for 3 weeks, and we all saw the devastation effects of the COVID-19 on our economy. 2 years on, here we are, another crisis or another turbulence called DDEP. Now, in my sixth form economic class, I never got to understand any word called short haircuts. But here we are, we have all learned new terms and technologies, which is a haircut. And like Winston said, we have not seeing the way clear in terms of where we are heading with this energy crisis. Now, these are the concerns of the business leaders, that over the past almost 40 years during the Fourth Republic, they have walked into one turbulence after each other. It used to be like probably almost a decade, cycle. But what we are seeing currently is like 2 years cycle, And for them, one of them told me, if they have survived COVID and survived doomsday, they can survive any other thing. So that means resilience, right? Yes. Same way we at Graphic Communications Group, we've also had our own turbulence and our own challenges. We are part of the economy. We are 73 years old, and my MD says, we have survived the Godesberg economy, and we are surviving the haircut economy now. That is the challenge we face, and that's why we are here. We're happy to have our panelists here, profs, the two profs, and Mike. I am eagerly waiting to listen to Mike because he's a business sector person with Petrosol. Now, on my rounds to this place from my house, you will see that their margins or their prices are a little bit less than the others on the market. Now, how is he going to do that? So probably he will share more insights into how he is striving in these particular instances. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we do these platforms, we do this to solve national problems. That is why we are here. And we have stayed relevant on the back of what we have done 3 years ago, which is selling credibility and not selling news. There's a distinction. So people say that we are in the business of selling news. No, I disagree. We sell credibility. The reason why we are here is because we are credible and we can attract people like you to be part of us. We have survived that business. But in doing so, we also have to build resilience because the current media space has changed. The dynamics have changed. Everything else has changed. We are actually in the media age, which presupposes that you either have to evolve or you die. That is where we are going with this kind of conversations. So on this note, once again, on behalf of the MD and the board and staff of Graphic Communications, I wish to once again welcome you all to this function. Thank you very much. Let's give him another round of applause. Moving from the energy challenges to the energy civil war to the Godesberg economy and the haircut economy. I don't know if we are out of the Godesberg economy. Years ago, we were talking about the fact that we've still been practicing the Godesberg economy. We're going to move out of the Godesberg economy. I don't know. I'm sure the economists will be able to tell us whether we've moved out of the Godesberg economy. But thank you once again, Bonhina Sama, who's editor of Graphic Business. We'll now take some brief comments from Mr. Kwamina Asumeyin, who is CEO of Stanbic Bank. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. Or if there's a rep from Stanbic Bank, if it's not here, to give us some brief remarks before we go into the panel discussion. Is Malko Afajinu here? Any rep from Stanbic Bank? Okay, so we'll get a rep from Stanbic Bank shortly. And based on feedback from previous conversations, what's going to happen today is that there'll be a lot more time for you to ask all the questions. I'm not going to ask a lot of questions. Okay, so Malko Afajinu is here. Let's welcome him with a round of applause as he gives us some brief remarks. And then I'll tell you how the whole program is going to go about. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. A very good morning, and welcome again to this morning's Graphics Breakfast Meeting. All protocols duly observed. I see a lot of brothers, friends, colleagues in the room. And indeed, if we are to look at your faces and your smiles, it belies the difficult challenges that we face as a country. We started this conversation a while ago, and the circumstances may have slightly improved, but we are still facing significant headwinds as a country. And I believe that the last time we got together to speak, the one thing that came out very strongly is the fact that no matter how difficult the situation, there are always winners and losers. And those who know the times and apply themselves to the times and understand the principles of the time find a way of soaring above the waves. And that's the essence of this conversation. I mean, be you an individual at home, be you a business owner, be you a corporate titan, virtually every single Ghanaian in our current circumstances need this difficult headwinds. And that is the essence of today's conversation. How do we navigate? How do we ensure that we are on the right sail? Because again, as has been said a long time ago, there is always a tide in affairs of men, which taking our fortune leads to fame. And that's the reason why we are here, to let us understand and appreciate the right things to do so that we can look back and say, yes, the times were difficult, but we came out looking good. So I would, at this juncture, say a very big welcome again, and I look forward to a very thrilling, a very riveting, a very revealing discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Malco. And so what that means is we're ready for the conversation. And I started by saying that based on feedback from previous sessions, today would give you a lot of time to ask all your questions. So I'd ask very few questions and then open the floor. Please don't disappoint me. So if you have all the questions ready, write them down and we'll give you a chance to ask all those questions. We'll go into the introduction of our panelists and then the discussions will begin. Now, our first panelist has over 25 years experience in petroleum downstream business management, starting from fuel retail outlet, management through field operations, supervision, to senior level management and consultancy. Now, through diligence and strategic partnership, he successfully migrated his business from consulting to an oil marketing company in 2014 and has since led his team to successfully grow the company from its small beginning to become one of the leading oil marketing companies in Ghana. Let's welcome Mike Bazumbil, who is CEO of Petrosol. Thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. Next is the Dean of the School of Business of the University of Cape Coast. With interest in applied corporate finance, financial development regulations, and sustainable governance, let's welcome Professor John Gachi. And last but not least, has a PhD in financial and development economics from the University of Ghana and is currently Associate Professor of the University of Ghana Business School. Let's welcome Professor Ejapoma Jekedaku. Please have a seat. Okay. Thank you very, very much. And if we could get microphones to all our panelists so we could start the conversation. Now, it's important for us to understand where we find ourselves today. For me, that's the most important thing, and what to expect. Even before we start thinking about how to thrive during this economic turbulence, it's important for us to understand where we are and the expectations going forward. Is it going to get better anytime soon, or we'll have to endure with this for some more time to come? Let me start off with you, Professor John Gachi. I'd like to start off with you on where we are currently and the expectations of things to come.
Well, I think I want to start with the curvature of the business cycle. That curve tells us that there are points in time that you go to boom, you go through depression and recession, and you rise up again. So clearly, where we are today, we are in turbulence, but there is expectation that we'll be out. But that expectation depends on two things. Whether we are able to identify the challenges we face correctly, and profile the right solution to them, and whether we are also able to identify the opportunities that come with the challenges or the turbulence we face today. If we're able to apply our strategies to dealing with them, then we have an outcome that will help all of us, and that outcome is what we need to sustain. So, yes, we're in turbulence, but there is every opportunity, every expectation that we'll be out of that turbulence. But we must devise policy strategies that will help us to come out of that.
I mean, I'll get to the policies and strategies in detail, but when you talk about, and I know you've been monitoring how we are going, okay? When you listen to all the things that we're putting in place, does it look like we're on the right path?
Well, you will say on one breath that we're on the right path, and on the other hand, no. Take debt exchange program. That debt exchange program is meant to clean the books of the government so that the debt burden will be lessened and allowing other participants in the space to sacrifice. But as to whether that is enough to take us where we want to go, that is the question. But as I see, it is not enough to take us where we are going. And that is why we are not surprised to see the back and forth about the debt exchange program. Now, go to mobilizing more revenue. Now, if you are not careful in attempt to enhance revenue, you are likely to put much more pressure on the revenue institution, and the public and the business community will see it as a harassment. And that will bring about what we call counterproductive nature of taxes. So the taxes will not come the way you expect them. So in all these things, we need to adjust ourselves to see the middle way that will benefit government and benefit businesses. In taxation, when I was working with VAT, the principle we have been working with is that even if the business defaults and it has to pay some penalty, it is the business that brings the revenue. So we will do everything possible to get back to the business, to nurture that business, to ensure that business come back on track and begin to contribute to revenue. So you can't have a policy only focusing on getting revenue. You might have a policy that focuses on getting revenue and nurturing the entities that provide the revenue. And that is what is the difficulty we are facing now.
Mm-hmm. I'll get back to you because we have a lot to talk about, all the strategies that we are putting in place. Because in thriving is not all about, businesses and individuals. The policymakers also have a major role to play because whatever they put in place affects all of us. Let me get to Professor Jekedako, whose PhD was from Nottingham University. Let me just do that correction. And I ask you the same question. So, over the last 12 months, we've been having this conversation back and forth. So far, we've put in place a lot of policies here and there. But if you look at the country today, what state are we in? And based on the policies that we've put in place, what are your expectations going forward?
Okay. I think that we have tried to put in certain policies that would help revive our economy. But I also think that we need to do more. We have done the DDEP, and we had some resentments from those who were going to be affected, but we managed to go through. We've got the approval from IMF, and of course, that brings in some credibility into the economy. And we have seen some of the benefits of the credibility in our exchange rates. We've seen that it's stabilized a bit. But I think that we need to do more. And the reason I say so is because we are attempting to bring our deficits down. And we are looking at revenue and then expenditure. We have put so much emphasis on revenue, but I don't think we are doing enough on the expenditure side to be able to get us back to where we expect to be. As Prof. Gachi just said, if you put too much pressure on those who are giving the revenue, then in the end, you are not going to be realizing the kind of revenue that you want to realize. And we've seen AGI complain several times about the number of taxes that have been imposed on them. Us as individuals as well, not just businesses, we've seen the taxes. And it's unfortunate that our economy is predominantly informal. And so when taxes are imposed, we see the same people paying the taxes over and over again. And that puts a huge burden on those people who are paying the taxes. Now, in terms of expenditure, I think that government has announced some, some cuts in its expenditure, but I still don't think that those cuts are enough. There are things that we could still look at and cut down. There's nothing like saying that, this doesn't cost so much. Even in our personal lives, if we see ourselves struggling, the little things that you cut down would come together and be huge for you. So I think that we need to look again at the items that government is spending on and see whether there are more things that we could do to bring the deficit down.
Talking about we need to cut down further, because I know we've, during the presentation of the media review, we cut down expenditure by some 20 billion Ghana cedis. Is that not enough? What other things must we do? What other, cuts in expenditure are you expecting?
Well, I think that there's some flagship programs that are useful, and if we're doing well, it would be okay for us to go with those flagship programs. But we are not doing so well. We need to focus on the very important things now. Like I'm saying, I'm not saying that those flagship programs are not important, but I think that we need to focus on reviving our economy, and that helps us to generate the kind of revenue that we want to generate, and we bounce back to the economy. We know about, I think we've said a lot about the free SHS program. We have to find a sustainable way of dealing with it. The current way is not sustainable. We have to also be thinking about our elections. We've spoken about constitutional review. Don't get me wrong, democracy is also very important, but it comes at a cost. Every 2 years or so, we tend to have some elections, and those elections do impose costs on the ordinary person. Are we going to be able to review? I think you are the one who asked whether we're still practicing the gadgets-based economy.
Yes.
If we look at ourselves, are we still in a position to be carrying out elections every 2 years? Those come at a cost. Can we put everything together, district assembly elections and the main presidential parliamentary elections being put together for us to be able to reduce the cost that we want to be able to reduce? Can we make sure we are also enforcing on the long-term strategy that, we have NDPC at play? Is NDPC very well resourced to be able to enforce the long-term strategy that we have so that the politicians don't drive our economy with their manifesto? We go by the plan that we have for the economy. In that way, people or politicians don't abandon projects that have been started, because we've all come together to set a strategy for ourselves in the economy, and we are going by that kind of strategy. These are the many ways that we can practice to bring expenditure down.
Great, thank you very much. And so listening to you and Professor John Gachi, you're talking about the fact that we're focusing sometimes so much on revenue. And because, our tax net is very small, As we focus so much on revenue, the very people who have been paying are the same who keep paying, and by extension, they become worse off. Let's get to the businessman and find out how he's coping. I mean, how he's able to ensure that, while, sometimes the very big ones are charging us more for fuel, he's managing, he was supposed to be interested so much in profit, is still able to make it affordable even for the masses. Tell us how business is going in the midst of these times.
Thank you. Thank you, Winston. For us in the private sector, we understand that we are in very challenging times. And we also understand that in crisis, you deal with the basics. And I'm glad to see the Chief Director of the Ministry of Finance here. And I am glad that she's a lady. In moments of crisis, especially take a family setting, the focus is on food for the children. It's on basic needs. If you are flying, you're on air, and there's some emergency, whether you're in business class, you are in economy, that is not when you are requesting for some special, food to be served you because you're in business class or because you're in first class. At that moment, it's about safety. And so the focus is on, please follow the emergency rules. So when we find ourselves in critical moments like this, our desire as private sector operators is that collectively working with the finance ministry and the economic management team will focus on the basics. Because in crisis, you come out of crisis when you focus on the basics. We have done this before. As was alluded to, in the early 80s, when we were in crisis, whilst we were going through this, we came up with the PAMS card. And it was intended to address basic needs as we deal with the macroeconomic indicators. So having laid this foundation, I'll come back to your question. So as a private sector operator in these crisis moments, we have focused on the basics. Our customers, how do we survive? How do we work together? How do we weather the storm? Because the crisis will be over, but life must move on. And so we make internal sacrifices to be able to come down a little bit to cushion the customer and still commit to delivering quality, delivering value to the consumer. So they are not moments for expectation of lavish living. So as business leaders, we sit down and we say, we must cut down on non-essentials. I have cut down on foreign trips. It is unnecessary. I must stay back a lot more and deal with the issues. And we have focused on the basics. And what are they? Who are the most vulnerable? Even within the staff, if we don't have enough to increase salaries, significantly, who are those who are mostly affected by this crisis? Can we target and ensure that those are supported? And so we started by targeting those in the lower tier and making sure that the increment in salary started from there. And as we, moved on, we kept on also moving it, up the ladder. And so that energizes the team because they must live to see tomorrow. So this is what I can say for now.
Okay, I mean, so you're making the point that you've had to cut down on a lot of things. You'd have to sacrifice. Because, the Ghana Statistical Service had indicated that about 2/3 of Ghanaians have not returned to pre-COVID expenditure. So their household income hasn't returned to pre-COVID-19 levels, which means they are worse off as we speak. But you are saying, okay, because you are in leadership, you're in management, you see people in need. You have cut down on a lot of things so as to let the people appreciate where you are, and some of these would go to the people. So more of a relief to the people in your company. That's a good one. And I'm happy you talked about the chief director of the Ministry of Finance, Bini. I was going to mention it, and I was going to direct that a microphone be very close. I'm happy that she's, come here, because a lot of those times they'll watch on TV, but now that she's here, if a microphone is close, it'll be important to also appreciate a few things and maybe ask a question or two. It may not be my questions, it may be your questions. Isn't that the case, Chief Director? She says that's the case. So please, the microphone is coming. Let's get it very close. So we know that we can have all the questions. But let me get back to you, Professor John Gachi. And I'll come back to you, Mike, because you made a very important point. Professor Gachi, he's talked about how they've had to cut down on a lot of things. This is how I want us to do it. So we're talking about thriving during these, economic turbulence. First of all, what must the leaders do? What must the businesses do? And what must us, the consumers and Ghanaian citizens, do to ensure that we thrive?
Thank you. Well, first of all, the principle in crisis time is that you need to up your game regarding efficient spending. And that comes with prioritizing expenditure. And that is what we need to see around every activity of government. So we need to come to the conclusion that we have now appreciated what we call efficient spending. And that, I beg to say, is a problem. And that must be addressed. Yes, let me start from the household sector, as you said. I think this is the time that all of us must revise our personal budget. This is the time that we have to revise. There are people who have a lifestyle that they don't want to change, even in a crisis time. And that is not correct. There are people who have their meals or lunch at expensive places. They don't want to change. So the appeal is that we need to revise our lifestyle. We need to revise our budget. When we do that, the same principle we are asking government to adopt will apply to us. So we will prioritize our expenditure, and then we will ensure that our expenditure is efficient. Of course, some will argue that what you want us to prioritize is not even enough. But generally, that is what we ought.
Is that not the reality? Because you're asking people to, there are a lot of people whose lifestyle are basic, normal.
Yes, that is true across board. But when you carry on with this principle, you will realize that it is better for you than fighting that your income is not enough. And some are doing it. In fact, some are taking their cars to work, maybe 2 times in a week, and they are using trotro the rest of the week. That's one of the planning, because we are in difficult time. So you can't run away from some of these things. You need to identify the market you go. All the markets are not for all of us. All the markets are not for all of us. You need to identify the market you buy your things. But if you want to maintain the lifestyle, your expenditure cycle, then you will have severe problem. Because the ideal thing to expect is that as you are paying taxes, you have an efficient public transport system. So during crisis, that will cushion you up, but we do not have. The ideal thing is that as you are paying taxes, in a crisis time, government will look back to you and say, let me support you. But that is not what is happening. So you need to take everything in your own hands to plan and ensure that you achieve efficiency at least so that you can survive. And the same principle goes to assemblies, go to municipalities, go to the central government. The same principle is applied there. You cannot bungle up a number of projects. You told us you are coming to do 88 hospitals. Then, having not done that, you are telling us you are going to do 111. Now, when you look at that, it beats your imagination. And nobody is saying that you cannot provide such facility for people during crisis time. But the number and how that will eat into other important things that you are doing, that is what is important for us. So all of us will have to apply the same principle, and with time, we'll be fine. But if you want to manage the economy as though we are not in crisis, then we will not come out of the crisis. I said from my beginning or my introductory statement that when we identify our challenges, the way we strategize to solve it is what will help us to come out of the crisis faster or delay or remain there. So it is very, very important we do what is right to come out of it. Inflation. Inflation does not only show us that it erodes income, it truncates the purchasing power of people, or it brings about difficulty. But inflation, as we are given by the Statistical Service, creates opportunity for us to solve our problem. They told us that food inflation is driving for some time. Food inflation just dropped the last announcement window by just about 3%. It's not a trend, it just dropped. We don't know what will happen in the next period, but it tells us that there are baskets of food items we are not producing. We need to focus on that to produce. There are baskets of items that we are not processing. We need to focus on that and process. So inflation does not come with spelling out the difficulties we are facing, but it also comes with opportunity for us to devise strategies to solve, and that is the way we solve our problem.
But talking about, you don't run an economy as if you are not in crisis. Is it the case that we are running this economy as if we are not in a crisis? Is that what we're doing?
Well, that is observable.
Is that what we're doing?
That is observable.
So that's what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get to Professor Chekedako. Whether, and I would ask, the Chief Director that question, because you say that's what you've observed. I would ask why we're running the economy as if we're not in a crisis. But let me get to you and ask the same question again. How do we thrive? Starting off with the household, but most importantly, government.
Okay, so let me start with government.
Please do.
Thanks to DDP, thanks to the IMF, we now have some fiscal space. We have some breathing space, and it's important how we are able to get out of this turbulence would depend on how we make use of that fiscal space that we have. It's important that we focus more on capital expenditure. We need to build infrastructure. We need to look at the sort of things that would help us and increase our productivity. Those are the things that should be our focus. It's also very important for us to look at other sectors of the economy. that can help us generate the needed revenue that we want to generate, and then also help us stabilize our currency. I think for a very long time we've been focusing on our primary products that we know. We haven't made, or we have attempted to add some value to our products, but I don't think it's enough. It's important for government to look towards that direction and see how it can give incentives for certain sectors like the agro-processing sector, because those sectors actually appeal to the skill spectrum that we have in our economy. And the sector is also able to give us the revenue, because once we add value, our products don't suffer from fluctuations in our currency, fluctuations in the world market prices. Again, we need to be thinking about tourism. We are blessed with a lot of resources around. Why not look at tourism? Why not train people for them to be up for tourism, so that the river bodies that we have, the mountains that we have, I mean, if you go to a place like the UK, when they say Peak District is nothing. I mean, if we take our Abri Mountains, when we walk on the mountains, we see there's a point where people gather all the time and then watch over the entire Accra. What can we do over there to attract people to come? We need to think beyond that and then see how we can get tourism to come help in getting the economy back into shape. Now, with individuals, I think we've said it all. When you're struggling, you look at what is happening to you, and then you cut your coat according to your size. So if fuel is expensive, are you thinking about carpooling, something like carpooling, where if you have people who live in your area and are going to work, you join them, and maybe you decide that every other day your car will be used, the other days the other person's car will be used. Those are ways in which you can use to cut your expenditure. As individuals, I think that we also have to think about what else we can do in addition to our regular jobs that we do, to be able to fetch the needed revenue that we have to fetch to survive in our economy. So it's a matter of thinking, being innovative in the things that we do, and also cutting down our expenditure. Those things would help us survive and thrive in this turbulent economy.
Great. Let me get to Mike, because, I mean, while we're talking about, cutting down on expenditure, probably you do the carpooling and everything, the reality also is that we've had to pay more for a lot of things. And so it's not like the expenditure has remained the same. If it had remained the same, you probably would say, okay, that's okay, I can manage. Let me cut down a lot of things But now you have increased expenditure, some through no fault of yours. I mean, taxes here and there, businesses are increasing a lot of something. And some things are basics of life. You can't do anything about them. Even if they go up, you still would have to go and get them. So in such a situation, how do you go about it? But you've talked about your, business practice. I would want you to also talk about how you think government can help you businesses to make your thriving easier.
Okay, thank you. I think the key thing that I think government did well last year was the fact that finally they came to the reality that we needed the IMF bailout. I think that was critical. And you see, when you are in crisis, you have to be real, you have to be honest, you have to be sincere. Whether personal financial crisis, institutional financial crisis, governmental financial crisis, you have to be real. So that was great. The second thing that government also did was the invitation to stakeholders to have a conversation. I was privileged to be part of the team from the Ghana Employers Association, and also from the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry to engage Excellency the President and his team. And we had a very good conversation. However, I think this ought to have been sustained. And so my first point to government is that this must be sustained. It shouldn't be a one-off activity. And in fact, it should move from the Jubilee House this time around to the field. I'm the CEO.
Why do you want it to move away from the Jubilee House to the field?
I will explain.
Okay.
That's why I said I'm the CEO of Petrosol. My office is in East Legon. Our operations are dotted across the country. But I cannot sit in East Legon and see the reality on the ground. So periodically I move around. I engage even pump attendants, interact with them, get to understand their concerns. I tell them, when drivers come there and they insult you, they actually meant that it is a package delivered to you to pass it on to me. So that insult is actually for me. So give it to me. I engage my retailers because that posture of moving to the field and engaging, that in itself, the symbolism of it, it means a lot. So my suggestion to government is a lot more stakeholder engagement, and it is about the finance minister sometimes going to Abosokai to engage with the people there, going to the Makola market. That is where the activity is. That symbolism re-energizes people. It makes them speak even more freely than the confines of the Jubilee House or inviting stakeholders to the finance ministry. That engagement just says that I am here for you. So speak up your mind, within the confines of your environment. So my first point is the engagement must continue. 2, there has to be a parallel microeconomic policy framework running with the macroeconomic policy. In crisis, macroeconomic indicators don't solve crisis. It is the microeconomic indicators that solve crisis. Because the micro deals with the human beings. The macro, they are just statistics. So you are looking at poverty index. You are looking at, the living wage. You are looking at basic things. And that is why I said, in the early 80s, of course, some of us were very young, but we later read about the issues much better. We were in deep financial crisis. But whilst there was an attempt to deal with the macroeconomic indicators, there was also a parallel microeconomic policy framework that was dealing with the bread and butter issues that people knew with clarity. I hear Ghana cares with all. If you ask the average Ghanaian, Madam Chief Director, that Ghana cares, what is it about? Cares about what? If I'm hungry, will I get food to eat? So it must be communicated in simple, tangible evidence. And the focus has to be that no Ghanaian should go to bed hungry. Budget, unfortunately, Madam Chief Director, you were in charge of budget before you became Chief Director. So budget must focus on basic needs. Medical supplies. Under no circumstance should we run out of medical supplies. Food for institutions as in the schools. Under no circumstance should we run out of food for kids. Direct budget to deal with the microeconomic issues as you deal with the macro. Because if someone is sick, you deal with the sickness first before you talk about a car you want to buy for the person. That's not the time you are talking about the good things you want. Please, I want to be healed. If someone is hungry, you give the person food before you talk about the holiday you want to pay for the person to go on. So I want to encourage government that have a comprehensive microeconomic policy document that is well communicated with all stakeholders involved, that Ghanaians know that in this crisis moment, when we say Ghana cares, it means I will not go hungry. When we say Ghana cares, it means in terms of medicals, things have been subsidized. When we say Ghana cares, it means basic needs are dealt with. Then we'll have the right frame of mind to think about the macroeconomic issues. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. With the way you've ended, Mike, I think I don't have a choice but to go to the Chief Director. So, Professor John Gachi ended on this note. He says, we're running the country as though we're not in a crisis. The IMF document was very clear. Our policy was hinged on revenue mobilization, mainly. And I remember that quote very well. It says, authorities agreed with the fund that the policy will be mainly hinged on revenue mobilization. The question is, what about expenditure cuts? Mike has talked about how he's run his business, showing that when you are in difficult times, the people who must sacrifice the most are those at the top and not those at the bottom. If you can't give them anything, don't take the little that they have from them. Unfortunately, the suggestion here is that the little that we have, which is not enough, is what you're still taking from us. Let me hear from you.
Good morning, everyone. And let me first thank Graphic Business and Stanbic for establishing this platform. Let me also thank the panelists for the insights they've provided this morning. I think they've made very interesting observations and I've taken notes. I was actually coming here to listen because we get to speak quite a bit. So this morning I came with my notepad to just take notes and go back and see how we can influence the 2024 budget with some of the observations that are being made. But since you've ambushed me, I will gladly share some observations and perspectives from the ministry. And at the ministry, we welcome any opportunity to share with Ghanaians some of the things that we do behind the scenes. I'm here with my colleague, director from the ministry, and talking about DDEP, he has led that. Mr. Samuel Danko Alkes is here with me, sitting at the back, and I think I'll invite him to also share a few perspectives. So if you hear about DDEP and haircuts, the guy who's been leading it's right here with me.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah.
He would have a few questions.
He'll have a few questions to answer. Winston, let's get back to the serious issues of economic development.
Sure.
And the economic crisis that we find ourselves. I think Prof alluded to the fact that, and Prof, the two Profs, right? I think they've outlined how we got here. And in as much as people would want to contend with how the reasons why we got here, I think it's very clear that we are still recovering from COVID. And nobody should pretend that we have overcome the effect and the impact of COVID. Number two, there's global economic crisis. It is not just Ghana. And I think we should establish that. But back to the point you made about our IMF program hinging on revenues. It's hinged on revenues because as a country, we do not collect enough revenues. And I think everyone must understand that. Compared to our peers, even within the region, we are doing 13% of GDP. If you go through Accra, you drive through Accra, you see the buildings in Accra, you see the cars being driven, you can tell that there is money in the system. And yet, what comes to the state to provide public service is not as happens in other countries. So there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the GDP, what we produce as a nation, and what comes to the state to deliver public service. And that is why it's important to look at our revenue generation. How are we doing? I've heard, I'm sitting with the Guta president, so my ears are already full with how much taxes we are collecting and the pressure we are giving them. But do businesses pay enough taxes? Do professionals pay enough taxes? Do those, well, you cannot be in the UK, you're studying in North End and Prof. If you pay a house help, she will pay taxes. Do we get our masons, our house helps, our electricians, and all of those professionals to pay taxes? So there's a disconnect. But they expect government to provide them with public services. Winston, give me a minute. The other thing is that do businesses pay the taxes that they should be paying? If you went around Makola, do you think that the incomes that the businesses there earn, they are paying enough on their income taxes? In other countries, people pay about 20 to 30% of their income as taxes. How many chief executives in Ghana, we see them all over, how many of them pay taxes on their incomes? So there's a disconnect, and I think that it's important we recognize that. Okay. Now to expenditures. When we talk about government expenditures, the biggest expenditure is compensation. How do you reduce compensation? In other countries, when they are in crisis, they lay people off. They lay workers off. In fact, in some jurisdictions, they lay policemen off. They lay teachers off. Here in our country, we haven't laid anyone off. Indeed, that is more of a social welfare system than actual expenditure management. We do not lay anyone off. In fact, there's pressure on government to take on more nurses and more teachers. And you are saying we should cut down expenditures. This year, ask Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. We haven't been able to employ a single trainee. We haven't added any more people on our payroll. So that is an expenditure cut. Are Ghanaians willing to make those sacrifices? That should be, in fact, if we can reduce our compensation budget, which is about 51 billion, by 10%, that 5 billion can fix a number of roads, can pay more than 20 contractors or 50 contractors. So if we reduce our compensation budget by just 10%, we are hovering around 51 billion. That is half of what GRA is collecting this year. So we are using half of the revenues generated to pay salaries and wages. Can we add on? No, so we haven't added on. So that is efficiency. We are reducing expenditure. In other years, we had added 40,000 annually. That translates into higher expenditures. So we have decided government has decided not to increase that expenditure. And nurses are at home, teachers are at home, because we cannot afford it. So if you want us to, it is not goods and services. And by the way, goods and services, the biggest expenditure on goods and services is health. And it's education. It's LEAP. It's school feeding. It is not, and that's why, even though I agree with you that we should cut our code according to not our size, but our resources. It is so difficult because it's so sticky. The areas that you can cut are so minimal. You cannot cut statutory funds. Let's get to the point of statutory funds. 25% of all revenues collected goes to statutory bodies. That is not money that comes to the Ministry of Finance for the minister and cabinet to make a determination as to discretionary expenditure. It is not available. But how are those money? 25% of your revenue goes to these statutory bodies. How are they managed? How are SOEs managed? So we need a whole of government approach to our budgeting, to expenditure management. How are SOEs performing? Some SOEs are behaving like we are not in a crisis. Their chief executives, I don't want to go there, but it impacts on your fiscal. It impacts on the delivery of public service. So it is not, it's most of the discussions are very anecdotal. They are not based on facts. They're not based on the statistics. But Winston, you go back, don't take my word for it, go and pick the budget, look at the expenditures, look at the revenues, look at where government is spending money, and you tell me, give me a call, and tell me, Eva, I think that I should cut the expenditures here, and I'll gladly look at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will do that. But before we do that, you talked about the number of people who pay taxes. And of course, that's part of the responsibility of government, is to ensure that people pay taxes. We've had this conversation over and over again. I'll start with the 2018 budget, when we indicated, for instance, that people people needed tax identification numbers. And then we talked about it, and we said we had actually increased the number of people known to tax authorities. And those who have expertise in taxation will tell you, if you're known to tax authority, that's the first point. The next point is how you're able to get those persons to pay taxes. Part of your responsibility is, during coronavirus, you gave funds to over hundreds of thousands of entities, businesses, SMEs. Zimbabwe, one of the best examples of formalizing an economy, incentivizing the people. Once they got registered, bookkeeping taught, the next moment they were paying taxes to government. The question is, upon all the formalization so-called that we did during coronavirus for people to even come for funds, how many of these people's incomes are known to tax authorities and by extension paying taxes? Yeah. Okay, I think we're getting you another microphone, so you can start all over again. I think we lost you at a point. Okay, so we have a new microphone, yes.
It's back.
Okay.
You. So you are right. We need to know, the state needs to know who is eligible to pay taxes. So that has been a challenge because we haven't really overcome our technological and technical issues. However, we are deploying some technology. I serve on the board of GRA, so I get to know what's going on there. So getting a robust tax database that helps us to know who is eligible to pay taxes is important, and we are working on that. We are also trying to work, as I said, I'm sitting with the president of GUTA, and he's talking about VAT, but you know, there are a number of interventions that have been implemented over the years. Not all of them have been successful, but we also want Ghanaians to also become a bit more patriotic and responsible, because it's difficult for government alone. Just yesterday, to go about always asking people and pushing people to pay taxes. In a lot of countries, I know taxes are paid willingly. I mean, there's a date you have to file your taxes, and people actually run and ensure that they pay their taxes. Here, we do not have that. I mean, we have to really get a big whip and get people in line and ask, even though they know it is the law and it's their responsibility. And when you insist, they think that government is overbearing and government is too insistent. But we need Ghanaians to also partner government. That this is, if we expect our roads to be done, we should also pay our taxes, because how else would government provide a public service that we so much need? So I think that some Ghanaians should also take part of that responsibility. Not every time, I mean, if you look at the news, there are so many countries going through floods and climate change, the effects of climate change. Nobody's blaming government. But here, I mean, your road gets broken and they say government, and they are actually mentioning names. And they'll mention the name of my minister. And how is he in charge of floods? You know? In Cape Town, there are floods yesterday or this week. And nobody is blaming the government, but everything is government. And yet, we don't do our part of paying the taxes. Doctors, lawyers, nurses, business people. We don't want to go into details, but Joy and all the other news outlets, I want you to be a bit more detailed in your analysis of some of the things you do. And Winston, I like you. I watch you. I listen to you. I think it's important to delve into some of the numbers and see how much government is doing. And it was Prof. Gatti who said, we are not clear where we are going. Prof, let me assure you, we are very clear where we are going. We are extremely clear, because if we are not clear, we wouldn't have a program with the fund. We have a PCPEC program that we are implementing. Government has identified agric, and Prof. Jeche mentioned that. There's a clear program that government is implementing. In fact, last Friday, my minister met with 5 ministers in his office till late into the day, with the Minister for Agric, with the Minister for Agriculture, with the Minister for Trade, and agreeing on specific targets, and the Minister for Information. He will kill me if I don't mention him. But there are very clear targets that we are working to meeting, bringing inflation down, working to bring inflation down. And by the way, I'm talking about expenditures. Bank of Ghana is not giving us any money, so we are really working within the revenues that we are generating. When the revenues don't come in, no payment gets done. So that's why contractors, until the revenue comes in, until Guta and his team pays the taxes on imports and the VAT, we do not, unlike other countries, we cannot pay. Okay. So it's us, and when the revenues come in, that we are able to make payments. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope I don't get to speak again. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to ask any questions, even though there are lots of questions to be asked, but it's not about me. That's something I know, and that's something I'm reminded of all the time. And so I indicated at the beginning of the program that for this edition, the third quarter of the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Meeting, we'd have a lot of time for questions. We have 38 minutes to go. Pardon me, but I had to do this on your behalf. It's now time for you to ask all your questions. I see Dr. Obing. Yeah, I know you want to ask a question, Dr. Obing, but don't worry, I'll give you a chance. I definitely would give you a chance. Please show by hand. You tell us your name and the institution you're coming from, and then if you have any question or suggestion, please go ahead. The Chief Director says she's picking all the points, to aid in the budget preparation. Well, there's about 2 months to go. So, okay, I see a hand here. I see another hand here. I see a hand there and there. Let's pick the first 4 here. I'll come here after the first batch. Okay, so let's pick the 4 here. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric Amponsa Boate. I'm a tax consultant. I think I've been on a program with Prof before. I'll start with our lady from the ministry. You see, we always say that there's a lot that government can do. Hello? Sometime within the first quarter of this year, I think in the past years, we've always been discussing online, how to tax e-businesses and all of that. Sitting probably at head desk now is a draft of a document which we call the Digital Service Tax. Right? It's been with you sometime in March this year. As we speak, nothing has been done. And I remember 2 weeks ago, we met at the International Tax Conference. And after the various presentations, We had groups, and we have recommended that.
So please, let's, as much as possible, let's be brief and also direct our questions to the panelists more.
Okay.
So they can address them, yes.
So I'm just asking and pushing that she should speed up the process.
Okay.
So that at least from 1st of January 2024, because that is going to bring us a lot more revenue. Now we are looking at tax to GDP. We are hoping that before the end of the year, it will move from the current 12.5% to 18%. And I agree with her. In Ghana, most people don't pay taxes. If you look at what we have now, the individual is paying more tax than the corporate bodies, 35%. And these are people who spend money, okay, who save money. And those savings eventually turn into what? Investment. So if you tell me that if somebody earns more than 50,000 cedis a month and immediately is paying 35% of it, it will really not make them, be able to even work harder. Now, my good friend.
Finally.
Oh, I have.
Yes. There are a lot of people who want to ask questions, please.
I will summarize it for
In a minute.
all of them.
In a minute.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, this year we've had 3 new tax, the bills, the Income Tax Act. You see, when we're working with Act 592, exchange losses and exchange gains, whether they are realized or unrealized, they are deemed to have become what? Realized. Now it has changed. And I wish I had time, but we don't have time. So let the ministry look at it.
Okay.
The private person.
Please, let's move on to the next person, please.
Just a second.
Please, let's get to the next person. I beg you. We need to get the next person too. So we need to have a lot of people asking questions. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Bedua with the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Okay. First, I will humbly disagree with Madam that businesses don't pay taxes. I disagree, but I will leave it there. Okay. Second, I want to ask a more practical question. It's obvious that government needs revenue. It is also obvious that businesses are overburdened with multiple taxes. Now, how do we strike the balance to ensure that government gets the revenue and businesses are also relieved of this tax? I want Prof, Madam, and the Ministry of the Chief Director more practical to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, yes. Yes, to you, and then we'll come to the next table. Yes.
Right. Sorry. Thank you, Winston. My name is Michael Bwedi. I work with Ghana Integrity Initiative. I think that we have eloquently talked about most of the legitimate cuts, but we have, I don't know whether it escaped us, but we didn't look at the illegitimate ones that we need to deal with. If you look at the Auditor General's report, 2022, 1.4 billion irregularities were reported. Madam talked about if we cut wages by 10%, please let's also cut irregularities and the wastage. If you look at the public accounts, the budget overruns about 10 billion 2021, 2020, one. How do we deal with that? I think if we focus on also the leakages, the irregularities, we can save some money. Interestingly, import to Switzerland, natural resource import to Switzerland, between I think 2019 to 2021, this is Yoko's report, you can find out from their website. Switzerland recorded 9 billion inflows or imports, whilst Ghana's export was 3 billion. That gap, where is it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, let's go to the next table.
Yeah. My name is Albert Lutrot. I'm a pensioner. One of the panelists asked who are the most affected by the crisis which we are. And my answer is pensioners. And I'm saying this because, sorry, most of this, the DDEP, for instance, I wonder whether it took pensioners into consideration. in one of the meetings, I think the last part one meeting held here, one of the panelists advised that we should diversify our investments so we'll be able to save something for a dry day. In a situation where a pensioner, the little that we receive, I invest, and then when I go to ask for the little that I have, I'm informed that with the DDEP, what I invested, after 2 years, the market value has fallen even less than what, to an extent that I've lost over 1,000 cedis of what I invested. And I want to know, in a situation like this, what should a pensioner do? Now, we all know that prices are always rising, and pensioners are not considered with this. So please, what can we do in a situation like this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutrot. Final question before we get to the panelists. Yes.
Excuse me. Hello, thank you. My name is Alfredo Mensah Kantamaklu. I'm a pensioner, but I'm also Chief Executive Officer of Bestwell Group. Actually, I am very happy to be here today, especially with your team, as well as the lady from Ministry of Finance. The problem we have here is that those who are helping us, they count risk. They don't measure risk. IMF counts risk. They don't measure risk. Is to be counted. It should be measured like distance. It should be measured from 0. So when you have that, you have a problem. 1974, I explained this to the City of London, and then they were surprised. They were raising the duties for confirmation of this thing, what is the name? Imports support from 30 to 45, and they reduce it to 15. So it is very necessary that IMF is asked, are you giving us a measured risk or a counted risk? 2, in Ghana here, VAT is not paid by companies. VAT is paid by consumers. So I am asking, why is it that in Ghana, companies are given VAT exemption? They are not paying it. I was one of the people who went to training in the UK. I was running a business in the UK. At the time, I ran it for 25 years. And what we saw at the seminar, yes, thank you very much. What we saw was, and I was there when 5 Ghanaians came on this Commonwealth program to study VAT.
As you wrap up, yes.
Yes, please. Now, I want to beg the Ministry of Finance to ask Ghana Water, who are their biggest customers? How much water are they supplied? And how much do they pay?
Thank you, Mr. Tamaklu. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much. Kantamaklu, please.
Kantamaklu, thank you very much. Let's get to the panelists. Mark was asking the question. So, yes, you need revenue, but how do you ensure that in raising revenue, you don't make businesses worse off? Let me start off with you, Professor Gachi.
Well, I think that is the conversation that we need to have. And that is what it should be at the back of the mind of policy makers when they are making policy towards payment of taxation. So they are supposed to bear that in mind and ensure that businesses pay tax, but they are not overburdened. We know that government needs revenue. That is not in doubt. But it is not about pushing everything to businesses. It's about measuring what you are pushing to businesses to take. And it is very clear, the feedback is that it's too much, and we need to do something about it. And that will come through engagement and then possible revision. And sometimes, Madam said COVID is still with us. What makes COVID still with us? Because there is a policy statement all over the world. The COVID is over. I believe that through engagement, you could explain to people that we are still keeping that on the books of taxation because we needed the money. We are in difficulty. So in that case, you are engaging with the people. The people appreciate that, you can't take this task for the next 2 years because that is the sacrifice they want to continue to make. But if you make it as if, all of us don't know the World Health position, World Health Organization position on COVID, and what we go when we travel, what is about COVID, we know about that. So I think the right thing ought to be done. If you think that the task should be maintained, engage the people, give it a different name, or maintain the name and appeal to the people, give it a sunset clause, for which, if that time is over, you can take it off. Then, my gentleman, you asked of digitalization, taxation. I believe the last year I presented a paper on that. And my position is that, anywhere there is a viable economic activity, it attracts taxes. So I will not be against taxes related to digital economy. But the digital economy tax should be progressive and not to answer today's physical challenges. So if you want to make it 1%, and then progressively, that is accommodating of the economy system we are. But if you slap it, all of a sudden, huge rate, that would be a problem. So that was my position concerning digital tax. Now, we have done a lot of things to formalize, but I'm not in the ministry with you. And I don't know the kind of attention or commitment towards some of the reforms. You started with the tin. We don't know where we are with the tin. Then we have told ourselves that we can formalize the economy through national identification system. We have had national identification card, and in some countries that we have visited and stayed, national identification card is collected from the tax office, and they are able to use the national identification card or number to tie to some data to be able to identifying the economic activity. And they also try to bring on board an enhanced form of cashless economy system. It is only then that you will be able to get all those people we are calling to be on board, a mason, a house help, etc. So if you are paying through a payment system, it is able to be tracked if we configure the system very well. So we need to go back to the relevance of the national identification system. Now we see the national identification card as more of election tool or identification of persons who are citizens of Ghana, creating chaos. So we need to look at those things.
Okay. Let me get to Professor Jekedako. Because Mr. Lutrot also talks about the haircuts, the pensioners, today they're on retirement, they've been asked to invest, they've invested, and they are worse off. Okay, let me give you mine.
Okay, so I'm addressing the practical things that we can do to increase the revenue. So I think that we all agree by now that our economy is predominantly informal, 80 to 90% informal. And there's a need for us to think about how we can formalize. Various things have been done. We've tried, like Professor Gachi just said, we've tried formalizing using the TINs and then the national IDs, but what are we doing with them? In some countries, you cannot access essential services without showing proof that you have filed your taxes. Can we not transfer such things to this country? Can we not think about what we can do? For example, if you are going for a driver's license, DVLA is a place where you can grab a lot of people. Can we not attach a license, acquiring a license to payment of taxes? It's something that we have to think about. The second thing that I would want to speak about has to do with being strategic with some sectors. There are some sectors that you don't really have to impose so much taxes on, and that will depend on the direction that we want to take as a country. So, for example, when I was speaking, I spoke about the agro-processing and then the tourism sectors. Can we look at a way in which we can give these sectors some incentives, and I mean tax incentives, so that they can increase productivity and then we can generate more tax revenues from them? I think that's also a very important thing. Madam spoke about the fact that compensation and statutory payments take a lot of our revenue. I do agree with her, which is the reason why I think the You Start program is a very good one, because that is supposed to be enforcing entrepreneurship. Can we direct our attention there and make sure we are focusing on entrepreneurship and relieving, government of some pressure in terms of compensation, so that, again, we can tax these firms that come out of these You Start program and then generate more revenue? I think these are some of the possible solutions that I have got.
Okay, thank you very much. But let me also say that, please, there are research questions on the table. Kindly take time to fill them. Okay, so just check your table. You find some questions on the table. Please take time to answer the questions on the table. Mike, yes, the same question to you. Okay. And then we'll go for our next batch of questions from this side.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chief Director, I would like to assure you that we do have a number of Ghanaian companies, some indigenous, that are committed to dutifully paying their taxes to the states. I can speak for my company, Petrosol. We have been very committed to our tax obligations, and the Commissioner General himself has written to congratulate us on that commitment. But, and I am glad you are here, the same Commissioner General asked him whether Petrosol has written to him to ask for some concession by virtue of the fact that we have been dutiful in our tax payment and the fact that we deserve some support so that we can do more. And what was the response? You see, there has to be a clear, unambiguous direction towards incentivizing those who are doing what you want done. That will encourage those who are not doing it to fall in line, because they will know that if you pay your taxes well, the state takes care of you. What is the essence of citizenship? If you fulfill your obligations as a citizen, the state does not do it. Now, it means it is an imbalanced equation. It is when you fulfill your obligations as a citizen and the state also fulfills its obligation to its citizens, that is when it becomes a balanced equation. Then, you talked about the taxation. I agree with you, Madam Chief Director. I perfectly agree with you. However, I beg of you that when we are doing comparisons, they have to be done in context. You see, in Ghana, you may say the tax, rate is about 8% in terms of those who pay taxes. But ask yourself, how much of the average income of the person goes into personal social interventions, things that the state ought to have been doing? So if in Ghana, about 50% of the person's income goes to help relatives who ought to have been taken care of by the state, in reality, they are paying over 50% taxes. So if you do not contextualize it, because in the other economies, the tax payment may be about 40%, 50%, but after you have collected your money, nobody calls you to say that, oh, my medical bill, my school fees, my this, and the state will come to their intervention.
Okay.
Finally, you indicated that the challenge has been, the wage bill. I agree. Who is the employer? How can the employer be complaining? You employ the people. You've ballooned the wage bill. And you are complaining to whom? So, and again, it is also because in our economy, we don't have safety net for the unemployed. So it is difficult for you to lay them off. But in the other economies, they lay them off and they have unemployment benefits. So the state has a responsibility that it has met already. So laying you off is very easy. So do your part and we'll be fine.
Thank you very, very much, Mike. Okay, so let's get to this side, and please, let's be very brief. Yes, Joseph Abing, we'll give you a chance. Guta President. Who else? Okay, I see another hand here, so 3 of you. Please, let's be very brief. I'd want you to do it in a minute. Please go ahead. Okay, while we work on your microphone, I think we can start from there. Please go ahead with your name. Okay.
Thank you very much. Madam Chief Director, my sister Eva, said that Makola people were not paying the needed taxes. Only last week, I graced this occasion at GRA at Makola. I chaired the function where they rewarded taxpayers in Makola. So we are duly paying our taxes. The problem here is that the tax system as they are structured in Ghana does not ensure compliance. And so the 13% tax to GDP in the sub-region will continue to be last because the compliance is assured when there's affordability. The taxes that we pay here is just too much compared to the sub-region. So taxes should be simplified and structured in a manner that it will ensure compliance.
Okay.
And that's why we are not getting the tax to GDP around 18 to 20% like our neighbors are doing. Then we are having difficulty as business community to navigate through this turbulence of economic situation that we have in here. Because we have to contend with high cost of doing business in this country. It's so high. The duties that we pay, the high interest rate, the inflation that we have to contend with, is sad that it makes businesses very
difficult to do.
Okay.
Whilst doing that, government is still compiling a lot of taxes on us, and even to a point harassing us in the tax payment. When we are trying to do all these things and navigate through, that the consuming public is also on us, saying that we should reduce prices. How do we break even in our businesses? That's the difficulties that we have to contend with. Because the purchasing power of the consuming public is so minimized by the effect of the inflation. And that's the business that we do not do it in isolation. We do it with the consuming public. So we cannot also overburden them. We cannot overprice our goods so that the consumers cannot patronize. So at this stage, if you have to navigate through this turbulence, what do?
Thank
the
you.
government is on you, the consuming public is on you, and then the high cost of doing business is on you. It's a difficult situation for us.
Thank you very much, Joseph Obeng. Yes, please tell us your name.
Thank you. My name is Edmond Awaiti. My question goes to the CEO of Potoso. I like your presentation with respect to communication during crisis. But what should be the key component of the communication to engage the stakeholders during crisis? Explain that further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final question here? Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susanna Efwa Eminsa. My question would be that what are we doing as a country to bridge the education system and the government, or should I say the economy? Because the economy is all of us. Although we can easily bombard the government, but it's not just about the government. So what are we doing? Or should I say, what is the government doing to bridge? Like we say, a lot of us write papers. There are lots of papers circulating. Before you graduate undergrad, you write a paper, postgrad, you write a paper, but where are all these papers? Are they being taken into consideration? Is there a body that says to analyze these things? Because this is brain put on paper. So if we don't read it, it will just sit in the shelves doing nothing while we suffer. So what are we doing to, integrate or merge educational institutions into the economy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me start off with you. So that's all for the questions. I'm happy we had a lot of questions today. Let me get the answer from you, Mike, first, because Mr. Whitey wanted to know the form that the communication should take briefly from you before we get into how to bridge that gap between education and an economy. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. And there has to be deeper collaboration between industry and academia. Some of us practically we provide internship, programs. But I think her question is more particular about the research papers that are written for, as part of the graduation process. We need to engage a lot more at the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which I am a council member. We have had some engagements with some of the institutions. I believe we need to do a lot more, and that is what I can say.
Thank you. Professor Jekedako, you want to add anything to it? But let me just make a few corrections. So the Chief Director of the Ministry of Finance, I heard her say that the effects and impact of COVID-19 are still with us. It's not a case that COVID-19 itself is still with us. And the bit about Mokola is the fact that they don't pay income taxes. You say, if you want to just say that yourself, Madam Ivamens, if you don't mind, but I think I've made that point for you. And so that means we're getting to the end of today's program. Yes, you want to make a final point, Professor Gachi? Yes. I have 1 minute for you. Oh, you know how to be brief. You did summary, so don't worry.
Yeah, of the education. Of course, we cannot get the answer here, but I think the whole thing hinges on the economy. If the economy is very productive and expanding opportunities and creating jobs, some of the complaints that we hear of, you will not hear them. But we do acknowledge that we need to intensify entrepreneurship, and that is what we are doing in the universities. But we also do agree that throughout the world, countries like Israel are doing entrepreneurial success of about 5%. So we cannot believe that because we are rolling out entrepreneurship program, therefore all of a sudden we are going to produce masses of entrepreneurs. So we need to bear that in mind. We also know that we need to interface our teaching with internships. That is where we have huge problems. Where to place our students during internship. We have it very difficult with industry. So industry should open up to allow more of our students to have internship engagement. If you come to the university, it's a different ballgame. You can't come to tell anybody that if you are studying history, it's not relevant to the economy. You can't tell anybody for anybody to believe that. So we have our own philosophy about what we do there. But we are trying to, brand some of the programs. So if you are reading history with, let's say, international relations, etc. We are doing all those in graduate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor John Gachi. Thank you very much, Professor Japoma Jekedako. Thank you very much, Mike Bazumbil, for making time to join us this morning on the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Meeting. The focus has been on thriving during this economic turbulence, and I hope that all of us have learned a thing or two. The takeaway is that, well, businesses are struggling, but of course there should be a blend, okay? Not just taxing them too much, ensure that even as we tax, we're able to expand. Compliance is key. If you don't, businesses will find a way to avoid and probably evade taxes. For the households, yes, you're going through a lot of stress, but you know what to do. This is the time that you'd have to, tighten or maybe fasten your seatbelt a little bit. I know it's always difficult because you ask yourself, the people who are asking us to do same, do not do same. But your reality is your reality. Shall we bow?